So on our main reports page here, we have a couple of different tabs and different lists that we're seeing. And the first two are dedicated to the two main types of reports in LegalServer, which are base reports and saved reports. Really, the only difference between those two types of reports are how they were created and who created them. So base reports are created either by us here at LegalServer on the support team, and or by your site administrators. The saved reports, on the other hand, are essentially copies of base reports that general users are able to create. And that's going to make a little bit more sense once we get into running our report. We'll talk more about creating one of those saved reports. Also, generally, you'll have an All Reports tab on here, which is just going to show you a combination of base and saved reports. And some of you might still have this report tree, which is really just another format, but it's going to show you the same reports as your All Reports tab. Our first three there are regular LegalServer list view formats. So you can see things like our filters at the top. So all of you will see this active equals yes filter. So by default, we're only seeing reports that are active in the system. And the main reason we have that as a default filter is because reports in LegalServer cannot be deleted, even by your admins, but they can be deactivated. So if they get deactivated, they drop off of this list by default, but I can always, of course, get rid of that filter to see those deactivated reports again. You'll also notice that while I'm logged in here, I have this favorites of LegalServer staff, which is my login name. So that is an optional default filter that each user can set in their preferences. So to do that, if you go up to your user bubble at the top and click on My Preferences, towards the end of this page here, you can set your preference to default your report list to your favorites. And all that that's going to do is add that filter so that when you look at the reports list, you're only seeing those reports that you have marked as one of your favorites. And just to point out, you can do that by using this red heart column at the end. So if I get rid of that filter, you'll see some that are gray. And if I click it and turn it red, it is now one of my favorite reports. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and reset my filters there. You can also, of course, open up your additional filters and filter on things like who last modified a report, the favorites of another user, the name of the report. So just all options to find the report that you're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and jump into running your report now. So what I'm going to do is just scroll down to the report that I want to run, this basic cases report, and I'm going to click on the name of the report. And that's going to launch me into running this report. Now, you're going to see one of two things right away when you run a report. You're going to see either this message, like we're seeing here, please run report to view results, or you would just see results right away. And whether or not you see results right away or this message is just dependent on whatever your site administrator has set for that report. So it's just a configuration option. So if I do see this message, I just click my Run Report button. And now I'm going to see those results at the bottom. And this is a case-based report, so we're seeing cases down here. If I scroll back up to this green selected options box, I can see what types of cases I'm seeing here right away. So these are what we would call our default filters. So every time someone runs this report, they're going to see cases that have a disposition of open or closed and were opened last year. And if we scroll down, we can confirm that. We can see our date opened. All of those are in 2019. And all of these are either open or closed cases. Now, the filtering is the first thing that we can adjust as the user running this report. And before we do that, it's really just important to point out that when I say we can adjust these filters, This is only going to be for this session that we're running this report. So if I adjust a bunch of filters and I navigate away from this report or log out of LegalServer and come back tomorrow, it's going to look exactly like it does right now when we go and run it again. So any adjustments that I'm going to be making to this report, again, are just for this session. So if I do want to adjust those filters, what I want to do is click on my Filter Options tab at the top there. And now I can see my full list of the filters that are available for this particular report. And every report is going to have different default filters and different available filters. I can see any filters that are applied because they'll have that black text underneath the name of the filter. And I could go ahead and adjust those applied filters. So I could come down and say that maybe I don't want to see all cases opened last year, but I want to see all of the cases that were opened so far this year. So I would come to my date filter, my date opened, click it, and it populates in this purple section. And with date filters, you have a list of optional smart filters. And the reason we call them smart filters is because they're based on the day we're running the report. So for instance, previous year is obviously giving us 2019, and current year would give us our 2020 dates. You'll also see things like current month, previous quarter, etc. Now you do always have a custom dates option. So if none of these fit what you're looking for, you can always just manually type in those dates needed. We'll go ahead and select current year and see if we have any cases that pop up. Now, once I adjust a filter or add a new filter, change my filters in any way, I have to click my Run Report button again to refresh my results. So right now you're still seeing the same 80 rows, but if I come back and click Run Report to refresh, it's going to apply my new filter. And now we're down to just 4 cases that match my applied filters. Now, because we only have 4, I'm actually going to go back to my date open filter and just put it right back to previous year, just so we have more results there. But I'm also going to go ahead and change our case disposition to just open. Once I click Run Report, we'll see our open cases opened last year, and we have 70 of those. And now I could keep going and apply as many additional filters from this list of available filters as I need to. So if I'm specifically looking for clients who are veterans, I can come over to that filter, change it to yes, click Run Report, and now I'm going to see the 14 cases where my client is a veteran, the case is currently open, and it was opened last year. So again, just depending on the report you're running and the purpose you're running the report, you'll have different available filters and be able to adjust those to get that data that you want to see here. So that is how we can adjust our filters. And the next thing that we can adjust about this report as we're running it is going to be what we call our data options or columns. So when you hear us say data options or columns, we're talking about the actual columns of data here that we're viewing about these records we're pulling in with our filters. So I can see things like our case ID, our client name, our disposition, etc. Those are our columns or data options. And that is also something that I can adjust. So if I come up to my data options tab, similar to our filters, I have my list of default columns, so those ones that are showing right away right now. And I also have a list of available columns. So I could say that we want to see if any of our clients are disabled in the report. So I can select that field, use my little arrow button here to move it over to the display side, click Run Report to refresh. And now when I scroll down, I see our client disabled column and the data, of course, for these cases. So again, with our data options, just like with our filters, every report's going to be different. So every report will have different default data options or columns, and also those available ones as well. One other thing to point out here is that you can also move things off of the display side. So if I decided that I don't need to know the, let's say, initial legal problem category, and also maybe assigned office, I can select those and use the left arrow to move those off of the display side. And then click Run Report, and I no longer see those columns. So I can really get it down to just the columns that I need to see for this report. Last thing just to mention with that section is that you can also move your column orders. So if I decided, for instance, that our disabled field should be up a little bit higher or to the left in our report, I can select it and use my up button to move it. Again, click Run Report, and now we see the new order of our columns. All right, so that is how we can adjust our data options or the columns that are showing in our report. So the last thing that I can adjust as an end user running this report is how my report is sorted. So if I hover over each of these columns, you're going to see two little gray arrows. And that's how I can add some sorting to that column. You'll also notice that my primary advocate column, one of those is currently highlighted yellow. So that means our default sort on this report is by primary advocate. And we have two arrows just because we can go ascending or descending. Now I could remove the sort entirely from this column just by clicking the one that is currently highlighted yellow, and that will remove the sort entirely. And then I can go sort on something else, like for instance, legal problem code, again, ascending or descending. Now, another thing to mention is that you are able to add multiple sorts. So you can sort on multiple columns at a time. And you want to apply those sorts in reverse order of importance. So let's say that you mainly want to sort this report based on primary advocate, but where you have the same primary advocate, you want those to be sorted out by date opened. So I'm going to apply my date opened sort first, then my primary advocate sort, and where I have the same primary advocate, LegalServer staff, you'll see that it looks to that date open to sort those out from there. And again, you can do as many sorts as you want to, just to remember to apply those in reverse order of importance. All right, so a couple more things that you might see while running a report. One of them to point out is some totaling at the bottom of these columns. So this again is dependent on whoever built this report, but they can decide to show some totals for some of the columns like you're seeing here. The two main types of totaling are unique count and breakdown. So unique count is just showing us how many unique values are showing up in that column. So we have 14 different case IDs, which matches up to our 14 rows. So we have one row per case. That's a really great way to know that you have one row per case. And we have only 11 unique client names. So there are a couple that repeat, like test here. Now the breakdowns are going to show you the specific counts for each value in that column. So for instance, here we see that LegalServer staff has 9 cases that they're the primary advocate on. And you can also see the breakdown of legal problem code, so 6 bankruptcy cases, 1 divorce case, etc. The other option is for numerical fields. You're going to see the options of a sum or an average. So like you're seeing here for total household size, based on the numbers I'm seeing, that looks like an average, but you might also see that as a sum. And then lastly, you've probably noticed I've been scrolling past these charts and graphs as we've been working here. But you can have some additional display formats on reports as well. And again, that's just something that whoever built the report would decide on. So some reports might have no additional display formats. You just get the regular output at the bottom. Others might have 1 or 10. Really just depends on the purpose of that report and how your admins want you to be able to see that data. All right, so next just to talk about some of our options for saving this information. So if what you want to save about a report is the actual data that we're seeing today, so for us in this report, these 14 rows of data, you have two options for saving that. And they're both represented by these little icons up to the right here. So what we can do is we can export this report to Excel, or we can go ahead and print it out. So again, both of those options are for saving this data as it is in the system at this moment. Now, alternately, if what you want to save is not necessarily these 14 rows of data as they are today, but you want to save the structure that you've worked on building. So you have gone in and adjusted some filters, you've adjusted your data options and your sorting, and let's say that you need to run this report the same way every month. You don't want to have to come in here and make all of those changes every single time. So what you can do is create one of those saved reports like we talked about earlier. So the purpose of a saved report is to copy this base report with your changes. So what we're going to do is click on Save Report. We're going to give our report a new name. So what LegalServer will do is just put the name of the base report and the word copy at the end. But I highly suggest that you update that to something a little bit more helpful. And for any admins, I suggest that you come up with a naming convention that you ask your users to utilize. So some administrators like for users to put their own name on here. So I might put this as Leah's basic case report. Or another popular option is to kind of highlight what you've changed about the report. So I might put in here something like open cases for veterans, because that's kind of the big filters that we adjusted. You also have the opportunity to write in some notes. These will show up at the top of the report when you run it. So anything anyone should know about this report when they go to run it in the system. You can also select an office to associate report to. That is going to be an option when for filtering your main report lists. And then the same goes for your grouping and category. So you don't have to set these, but if you do categorize your reports, so for instance, to point out that this is a case data report, you can use that when you're filtering that main report list. So you can say, show me all of our case reports, show me all of our timekeeping reports. So it can be really helpful for that. And then lastly, it's going to automatically mark your new report as one of your favorites, but you can always uncheck that if needed. Now, once I click save, I have officially created my saved report, and it's going to launch me right into running it. So that I can confirm we have our new report name, we have our little note there, and the default values for this report are now the values that I set before. So open cases opened last year where our client is a veteran. And again, you're going to see the same default columns that we set up and our default sorting as well. Now, if I jump back to our main reports page and click on our saved reports, and I'm just going to go ahead and sort this by last modified, so we get ours up at the top here. You're going to see our new report, our saved report that we created. And again, I can always run it. It has my defaults based on what we set when we saved it, but it still works just like a base report. So I could still come in here and say, well, for my purpose today, for whatever reason, I actually want to see closed cases. So I can still adjust my filters, my data options, and my sorting. And the last thing I want to show you here is that if I go back to my original base report, it looks exactly the same as when we first started today. So same default filters, data options, and sorting. So as I mentioned before, none of those changes have stuck to this base report. All right, and that is everything for our introduction to running reports in LegalServer.